If you're thinking about buying or selling an older or historic home in Tampa Bay, you're in the right place. Today isn't just about how to list these homes, it's about understanding them. Because when people don't fully understand what they're buying or selling, well, that's when deals fall apart. Many of Tampa Bay's most desirable neighborhoods were built in the 1920s and 30s. And these homes are beautiful, charming, and irreplaceable, but they're fundamentally different from modern construction. And that different, it matters. And it matters a lot for both buyers and for sellers. Much of Tampa Bay's growth didn't happen gradually. It surged in the 1910s and 1920s. This was a defining era for our region. Railroads connected Tampa Bay to the rest of the country. The ports in Tampa and St. Petersburg were active. Florida was being marketed nationwide as a place for opportunity, health, and sunshine. And people came in droves. Entire neighborhoods in places like St. Petersburg, Dunedin, Safety Harbor, and Seminole Heights were almost built all at the same time, and often by local craftsmen, not national developers. And here's what makes that era so important to understand today. These homes were built before modern building codes, before central air conditioning, before mass-produced materials, and before the idea that homes would be torn down and replaced every few decades. Homes from this period were framed with old-growth lumber, wood from slow-growing trees that simply just don't exist in today's construction supply. Walls were plaster, not drywall, thicker, denser, quieter. Roof lines were expressive and complex, designed to move heat, catch breezes, and make a visual statement. Windows were wood, often custom-sized, and meant to be repaired and maintained, not discarded. Foundations were built with the different understanding of Florida soil, groundwater, and load, long before modern engineering standards. These homes were not designed to be disposable. They were designed to endure, to age, to be repaired, to evolve over time. But this is where many misunderstandings begin, especially today. Lasting does not mean unchanging. These homes were never intended to remain frozen in their original condition. They were built in an era when maintenance was expected, when systems were updated incrementally, and when homeowners understood that ownership meant stewardship. What creates tension now is when modern buyers, or even modern sellers, apply today's expectations to homes that were designed for a completely different time. A historic bungalow doesn't perform like a 2020s new build, and it shouldn't be expected to. But that doesn't make it inferior, it just simply makes it different. Understanding that difference between durability and modern performance is the foundation for successfully buying or selling an older or historic home in today's market. When I work with buyers today, I've realized something really important, especially over the last few years. When it comes to older and historic homes, there are two very different buyer mindsets, and understanding which one you are or which one you're dealing with can make or break a transaction. The first type of buyer fully understands what they're purchasing. They know they're buying an 80 or 100-year-old home, and they've made peace with that before they ever write an offer. These buyers expect quirks. They expect ongoing maintenance. They understand that character comes with responsibility. They appreciate original hardwood floors, even when they're not perfectly level. They respect original wood windows, even if they're not double pane. They understand that plaster walls crack differently than drywall, and that doesn't mean something is wrong, which is an important distinction. These buyers don't confuse age with failure. They understand that a system can be older and still functional, and that updates often happen over time and not all at once. They're not buying perfection, they're buying authenticity. And because of that, they price their expectations accordingly. Then there's another group of buyers, ones I see more often now, and these buyers are drawn to the look of historic homes. They love the bungalow vibe. They love the front porch. They love the charm, the trees, the streets, and the sense of place. And that attraction is completely understandable. These homes are beautiful, but where challenges arise is when buyers fall in love with the aesthetic without fully understanding the reality of ownership. This is often the moment when buyers are surprised to learn the windows may be original and close to 100 years old, The electrical system may have been updated in phases over decades. The plumbing may include older materials that were standard at the time, and the roof structure may not behave like modern trusses or engineered systems. None of these things are unusual for a historic or an older home, but they feel unusual if you're viewing the home through a modern lens. What's being flagged here is often difference, not necessarily defect. There's another layer to the conversation, especially for buyers who entered the market during the pandemic buying frenzy. During that period, many buyers had limited inspections, waived contingencies, purchased quickly and emotionally, and didn't always get the time or education to fully understand what they were buying. Now, years later, some of those same buyers are more cautious and sometimes more reactive when reviewing inspections on older homes. That reaction doesn't come from bad intention, and it often comes from experience. But an older home isn't revealing problems because it's flawed. It's revealing information because it has a longer story. Inspection reports on historic homes are almost always longer, and that doesn't mean that the home is worse. It means that the home has lived longer. The challenge is learning how to interpret that information correctly. And here is a huge difference. There's a difference between a true safety issue, a system that's at the end of its life, and an original feature performing exactly as it was designed. Without experience, these distinctions can blur, and that's when repair requests can become difficult. Liking the aesthetic of an old home is very different from understanding what it means to own one. And owning one doesn't mean something is wrong, it means something is different. Historic homes ask more of their owners, but in return, they give something that modern homes simply can't replicate. When buyers understand that before they write an offer, transactions become smoother, negotiations become more reasonable, and everyone walks away feeling good about the outcome. And that understanding, that alignment of expectations, is where great representation makes all the difference. In a normal market, an inspection is a learning moment. It's when you slow down, you learn to understand the home, and you make a thoughtful decision. But during that rush to buy a home, a lot of buyers never got that experience. If you bought a home in that era, you remember it. Homes were selling in a weekend, sometimes even in a day. Multiple offers, escalation clauses, people writing offers from their car. And under that kind of pressure, buyers did what they felt like they had to do to win. They shortened inspection periods, they accepted limited inspections, or in many cases, they waived inspections entirely. I'm not judging that, I understand it. In the moment, it felt like the only way to get a house. But here's the problem. When you remove or compress the inspection process, you don't just remove risk, you remove understanding. The difference between getting a house and understanding a house, buying a home, isn't just winning the offer. It's understanding what you're inheriting. And inspections are where you learn the personality of a home. What's been updated, what hasn't, and what needs attention soon, and what's simply part of the home's age. Many post-COVID buyers never got that full education. They got the keys, they moved in, and then life happened. They delayed the discovery effect. Fast forward a few years later, and a lot of those buyers are starting to discover things slowly. A roof that had less life left than what they had realized, aging plumbing, electrical quirks, drainage issues, windows that don't behave like modern windows, HVAC problems that didn't show up in one day. And when people discover these things after a purchase, it leaves a mark. It creates the kind of buyer trauma where the next time they buy, they want to inspect to protect them from ever feeling that surprised ever again. So the inspection becomes less about learning and more about control. Why this hits historic homes harder? That mindset shift matters in every transaction, but it matters most in older and in historic homes. Because with a historic home, the inspection report will almost always read differently than a modern house. It's longer, it's more detailed, it notes more conditions. Not always because the home is unsafe, not because it's falling apart, but because it's older, and older homes have more chapters. So when a buyer with a post-COVID experience reads a historic home inspection, they may interpret normal age-related conditions as major failures. The expectation gap is where modern performance versus a historic reality. This is the disconnect that I see. Some buyers bring modern expectations into a transaction that requires a historic lens. They'll say things like, why aren't the windows double paned? Why isn't every outlet grounded? Why isn't the floor perfectly level? Why does the roof framing look differently? And those are all fair questions if you've never owned a historic home. But those questions can lead to unrealistic repair requests if they're not guided properly. Because in a historic home, there's a difference between a true defect that needs attention and a historic characteristic that functions as intended, even if it isn't modern. For example, original wood windows may not be modern efficient, but they may be structurally sound and historically appropriate. Older plaster may show hairline cracks that are cosmetic, not structural. Electrical outlets might have been done in phases and over time, which is totally common. It's how frustration shows up in negotiations if nobody sets expectations early. And what happens is this inspection report feels overwhelming, the buyer feels exposed, and a repair request becomes a wish list to make an older home behave like a new one. That's when sellers feel attacked, because they're thinking, this home has been standing here for 100 years. It's not broken, it's historic. And now you have two good people on opposite sides of the same truth. One wants certainty and the other one wants fairness. The role of a great agent is to translate that inspection report. This is where an experienced agent changes everything, because the job isn't to scare buyers and it isn't to dismiss concerns. The job is to interpret the inspection correctly, to translate it, to say, these items are real and need attention, these items are maintenance and planning, and these items are simply part of owning a historic home, and they were visible in the price and in the character that you fell in love with. When buyers understand the difference, their repair requests become more reasonable, sellers become more cooperative, and deals stay together. But when that gap isn't addressed, especially with a post-COVID buyer, historic home transactions become unnecessarily tense. So the key isn't to avoid inspections. The key is to use inspections the right way, especially when you're dealing with a home that has a longer story. Let's talk about inspections, because this is where many historic home transactions either survive or quietly fall apart. Not because people are unreasonable, not because the homes are bad, but because inspections on older homes are often misunderstood. An inspection report on an 80 or 100-year-old home will almost always be longer than one on a newer property. And that's not a red flag. It's not an alarm bell. It's simply the reality of age. An inspector's job is to document conditions, and the longer a home has existed, the more conditions that there are to document. Here's the distinction that changes everything, and it's one most buyers and sellers aren't taught to make. There is a massive difference between a true defect, a deferred update, and an original home feature that is still functioning exactly as intended. When those three things get lumped together, repair requests become emotional instead of rational. A defect is something that is unsafe, broken, or not performing its basic function. Examples might include active roof leaks, unsafe electrical conditions, structural movement beyond normal settlement, plumbing failures causing damage, health or safety issues. And these items deserve attention, and in many cases, they'll even deserve negotiation. A deferred update is something that works but is nearing the end of its useful life, or it doesn't meet modern standards. An example of this might include an older HVAC system that still functions, plumbing that's aging but not failing, electrical systems updated in phases over decades, and older roofs with limited remaining life. These items aren't surprises. They're part of owning an older home, and sometimes they justify credits, sometimes they justify planning, but they don't automatically justify full replacement at the seller's expense. And this is where things get tricky, especially in historic homes. Original features were never designed to perform like modern systems. They were designed to perform for their time. Original wood windows were one of the best examples. They may be 80 or 100 years old, they may not be double pane, they may not meet modern energy efficiency standards, but they may still be structurally sound, properly operating, and historically appropriate. That's an integral part to the home's character. Inspectors are not preservationists. They're not appraisers, and they're not negotiators. Their role is only to document conditions, not to decide what should be replaced. So when an inspector notes that a window is old or single pane, that's information. It's not a mandate. That mistake happens when buyers or their advisors assume that everything that's flagged on an inspection automatically equals a seller responsibility. That assumption is where historic deals start to wobble. Because if we apply modern replacement logic to every historic feature, the transaction stops being reasonable and starts becoming unrealistic. Repair requests on historic or older homes may feel complicated because they're not just about fixing things. They're about interpreting history. You're balancing safety, function, fairness, preservation, and value. And that all takes nuance. It takes experience, and it takes calm leadership. For sellers, this is often frustrating. You've lived in the home, you've maintained it, you understand its quirks. So when a buyer asks you to replace an original feature that's still functional, it can feel like they're asking you to erase the very thing that made the home special. For buyers, especially those post-COVID mindset buyers, it can feel overwhelming. They're reading a long report, they're trying to protect themselves, and they may not yet feel that they have the framework to separate information from obligation. This is where an experienced agent earns their value, not by dismissing concerns, not by inflaming them, but by saying, this matters, this needs planning, and this is normal for a home of this age. And this was already reflected in the price that you offered. Historic home inspections don't need to be scary, they need to be translated. When inspections are understood and not weaponized, repair requests become more reasonable, conversations become more calmer, and deals stay together. And when that understanding is missing, even great homes can lose great buyers. For sellers, this part of the process can feel frustrating, especially if you've lived in the home for a long time. You know the house, you know its quirks, you've maintained it responsibly. You've raised a family there, hosted holidays, lived real life in it. And then buyers' inspections come back and it can feel suddenly like your home is being judged harshly, sometimes by someone who has been inside of it for less than an hour. So let me reframe this because it's important. This is where education, not emotion, matters most. When you sell a historic or an older home, the goal isn't to pretend that it's new. The goal is to get to closing with a buyer who understands what they're buying, feels protected, and still loves the property. That means your strategy is not to say yes to everything, and it's not to say no to everything. The job is knowing the difference between what's reasonable, what's negotiable, and what's simply part of a historic or an older home ownership. Here's a framework that I give to my sellers so that the process stays clear and calm. So first, reasonable requests, they're usually a yes or we can address it. These are items tied to safety, function, water intrusion, or material risk. These are the things that can kill financing, can kill insurance, or can kill buyer confidence. If something creates real risk, like electrical safety issues, active leaks, significant HVAC failure, plumbing causing damage, well, those are reasonable to address. Not because the buyer is being picky, but because the home needs to be financeable and insurable, and the buyer needs to feel safe moving forward. Reasonable repairs aren't about protection. They're about removing deal-breaking risk. So the second section is negotiable requests, and often these are credits, partial repairs, or shared solutions. Then you have that middle category. This is the gray area, and it's where most historic or older home negotiations live. These items might not be urgent today, but they're real, and the buyer will eventually, well, they'll have to deal with. In this category, it often makes more sense to negotiate with logic instead of doing major work under pressure. Sometimes the best answer isn't, we'll replace it. Sometimes the best answer is a credit, a price adjustment, a professional evaluation, or a scoped repair for one specific issue, and not full replacement. I can think of many things that fall under this category. And in historic homes, a clean credit can be smoother than a messy repair. Not reasonable requests are the third section, a polite no, but then we give them an explanation. And there are repair requests that simply aren't reasonable, especially on older and historic homes. These are requests that attempt to turn an older home into a brand new home. Explain it gently. Make sure that you as an agent or you as a buyer explain it gently. If the repair request is a preference and not necessary, these aren't automatically a seller responsibility. And it gives the buyers a choice whether they want to own the home or they don't. A buyer can request literally anything, but a seller is only responsible for what is reasonable in context. And here are 3 common places sellers get tripped up. Let's talk about how to avoid that trouble. Safety issues versus cosmetic preferences. This is the easiest place to get clarity. Safety issues deserve attention. Cosmetic preferences, well, they don't. A couple examples are a loose handrail on stairs, well, that's a safety issue. A buyer not liking a paint color, well, that's clearly a preference. A missing GFCI near water may be a safety issue, and a buyer wanting all the outlets updated to match modern standardization, well, that's a preference. We fix what protects people and property, not what matches someone's personal style. Then there's structural concerns versus age-related wear. Historic homes settle. They move slightly over time. Floors may slope. Plaster can show cracks, and that doesn't automatically mean structural failure. Teach the seller what to expect. This is where we separate normal settlement from abnormal movement, active water intrusions, or conditions that require professional review. If something is truly structural, well, then we take that serious. But if it's normal age-related behavior, we don't let that become too dramatic. Code upgrades versus historic reality, and this one is huge. It causes a lot of confusion because a home built in 1925 was not built to 2025 codes, and in many cases it doesn't have to be, unless you're doing major renovation or changing systems. Inspections often reference modern standards, but that doesn't mean your home is required to be brought up to modern codes simply because you're selling it. There are times when the code matters, especially around safety and insurance. But there are also times when the home is simply being evaluated through a modern lens, and we have to interpret that responsibly. If you want to sell your older or historic home with the least amount of trouble, here's the blueprint. Step 1, get ahead of the story. We don't hide age, we explain it. We position it, we tell the truth in a way that builds trust. Step 2 is pre-list preparation that actually matters. We focus on the few items that create fear. Those things can be visible water issues, obvious electrical concerns, roof questions, and HVAC uncertainty. Things that spook buyers and lenders. In step 3, we set expectations for buyers early. We attract the right buyers by being clear about what's original, what's updated, and what that means. Step 4 is creating a repair strategy before negotiation. We decide in advance what you'll do, what you'll credit, and what you'll say no to, so you're not making emotional decisions under pressure. Most stress comes from surprise. A good plan removes most of that surprise. Here's the mindset that keeps sellers in control. We respond to repair requests the way a professional responds, calm, specific, and documented. We don't say no emotionally. We say, here's what's reasonable, here's what we're willing to do, and here's why. A clear explanation is often more persuasive than a quick yes. When sellers understand what's reasonable and buyers understand what they're purchasing, historic and older homes don't become difficult deals. They become confident deals. And that's exactly how you sell a historic home, with the least amount of trouble. You set expectations early, you stay calm during inspections, and you negotiate based on reality, not fear. Experience matters, and speaking the language of historic homes changes everything. This is the point in the conversation where experience really matters, because older and historic homes don't just require a different strategy, they require a different language. I want to share something personal because it directly affects how I approach these transactions. I earned my degree in history from the University of South Florida, and I don't say that casually. History trains you to look at context, to understand why something exists the way that it does, to separate what changed from what endured. That mindset translates directly into how older and historic homes should be understood, evaluated, and sold. For many years, one of my primary focuses has been selling older and historic homes throughout Tampa Bay. Not as a niche, but as a specialty. Over the years, I've worked in neighborhoods like Seminole Heights, Hyde Park, Old Northeast, Dunedin, Safety Harbor, and many other unique historic pockets across the Tampa Bay area, even Ybor City. What experience gives you isn't just confidence, it gives you a pattern of recognition. You start to know which inspection comments are routine, which concerns lenders care most about, which issues insurance companies flag, and which repair requests are emotional versus necessary. That perspective doesn't come from textbooks, it comes from being in the middle of these transactions again and again and again. Historic homes have a language all of their own. If you don't speak it, everything sounds like a problem. Plaster cracks sounds like structural failure. Original windows start to sound like defects. Phased electrical updates sound like incomplete. Sloped floors sound alarming. But when you speak the language, you can explain what's normal, what's expected, and what's been priced in, and what actually does need attention. Being able to speak that language calmly and translate it for both sides is often the difference between a deal falling apart and a deal closing smoothly. You need an agent who can educate buyers without scaring them, who can protect sellers without alienating the buyers, and who can read an inspection report and say, this matters, this doesn't, this is historic, and this was already reflected in the price. And most importantly, you need someone who knows how to keep a deal together without ignoring real issues. Buyers benefit because they don't walk into ownership with unrealistic expectations or unnecessary fear. Sellers benefit because they don't feel attacked, misunderstood, or pressured into fixing things that were never broken. And when both sides feel understood, negotiations stop being adversarial and start becoming productive. Transactions with historic or older homes aren't about winning negotiations. They're about aligning expectations. When expectations are aligned, inspections become information, not weapons. Repair requests become conversations, not confrontations. And everyone walks away feeling respected. Older and historic homes deserve representation that understands both their past and their present. When you combine historical context, years of hands-on experience, and a calm, strategic approach, these transactions don't have to be stressful. They can actually be some of the most rewarding deals for everyone involved. Here is how successful transactions actually happen. When we turn historic and older home transactions from complicated into a confident sale. After all the inspections, the negotiations, the questions, and the emotions, I want to talk about what successful older and historic home transactions actually have in common. Despite everything we've talked about, age, inspections, repairs, expectations, most of these homes do sell successfully. And when they do, it's not because the homes were perfect, it's because the process was handled well. And here's the 3 things successful transactions always share. The first is educated buyers. Successful buyers are educated buyers. They understand that the home they're buying is not a brand new house. They're buying a piece of history. It's still doing its job. They know the difference between age and failure, character and compromise, information and obligation. When buyers are educated, inspections become a tool, not a threat. Repair requests become thoughtful, not reactionary. Education doesn't eliminate concerns, it gives them context. Number 2 are prepared sellers. Successful sellers aren't defensive, they're prepared. They understand their home's strength and its realities. They know what's original, what's been updated, and what's been priced into their home. They don't panic when an inspection comes back long, and they don't feel personally attacked by reasonable questions. Prepared sellers don't feel like they're being judged. They feel like they're participating in a professional process. That confidence changes the entire tone of the transaction. Number 3 is clear and calm communication. Historic home transactions don't need drama, they need translation. They need someone who can say, this is normal, this deserves attention, this is a choice, not a requirement, and this is already reflected in the price. When communication stays calm and grounded, fear doesn't get to drive the process. When buyers are educated, sellers are prepared, and communication is clear, something interesting happens. Historic and older homes stop feeling like obstacles. They become opportunities. Opportunities for buyers to own something unique. Opportunities for sellers to pass along something meaningful. Opportunities for neighborhoods to stay intact and alive. These homes have survived economic cycles, hurricanes, changing building codes and changing tastes. They don't need fear to sell them, they need understanding. And when that understanding is present on both sides of the transactions, deals don't just close, they feel right. Buying or selling an older or historic home doesn't have to be stressful or adversarial. With the right expectations, the right preparation, and the right guidance, it can actually be one of the most rewarding real estate experiences you'll ever have. If you take nothing else away from this video, I want you to remember this. Older and historic homes are not difficult because they're flawed. They're difficult only when they're misunderstood. If you're buying an older or historic home, your job isn't to make it new, it's to understand it. It's to understand why it was built the way it was, to understand which features are part of its story, to understand the difference between age, character, maintenance, and risk. When you approach these homes with understanding instead of fear, inspections become information, not intimidation. Repairs become planning, not panic. And ownership becomes something you step into confidently, not cautiously. And if you're selling one of these homes, your job isn't to defend it, it's to present it honestly, clearly, and strategically. That means respecting its history, acknowledging its realities, and setting expectations early so the right buyers find it and the wrong expectations don't. When sellers understand what's reasonable, what's negotiable, and what's simply part of historic ownership, the process becomes calmer, cleaner, and far less stressful. What we've been talking about this entire time is alignment. Alignment between history and modern life, emotion and logic, inspections and interpretation, buyers and sellers, expectation and reality. And when those things are aligned, historic and older homes don't create friction, they create opportunity. These homes have seen Florida land booms and busts. They've seen changing building codes, changing technology, and changing lifestyles. They've been lived in, repaired, adapted, and cared for across generations. They were never meant to be perfect, they were meant to endure. And with the right approach, education, preparation, experience, and calm communication, your transaction can endure too. And if you're thinking about buying or selling an older or historic home here in the Tampa Bay area, and you want a realistic, thoughtful, experienced conversation, one that respects both the home and the people involved, I'm always happy to help. These homes deserve understanding, and the people buying and selling them, they deserve clarity. Thanks for spending time with me, and I'll see you in the next video. I would appreciate it if you like, subscribe, and comment in the video. And if you need anything, my contact information is available anywhere across the internet and on social media. Until next time, I'll see you there.